Bienvenidos y bienvenidas al Congreso Ciudad de Infancia del Festival LOCUS. A continuación, desde Londres les presentamos al académico y escritor Tim Gill, defensor mundial del juego y la movilidad de los niños al aire libre. Muchas gracias, Tim, por tu participación. Para empezar, ¿cómo fue tu experiencia de niño en la ciudad?
I had a huge amount of freedom when I was growing up. In fact, my earliest memory, about the age of 4, is playing in the street outside my house. Now, when I was growing up, I moved around a bit and lived in various places, but almost always in small towns, and I had a lot of countryside and green space to roam around in. And from the age of 8 or 9, I would spend a lot of my free time playing with friends, traveling around my neighborhood, in parks, climbing trees, discovering secret areas, and roaming on foot or by bike. I just want to say also that inviting people to think about their own childhoods is a really powerful way to get them thinking about cities and neighborhoods. I've been lucky enough to give talks and run workshops in many parts of the world with people from all walks of life, and I often invite people to think about their own childhoods and the kind of places they used to play. And almost without exception, people over the age of about 30 tell me that they had a great deal of freedom as a child, and that children today have far less freedom. In my talks, I often use a map that illustrates this very powerfully. I'll share it now. It shows what you might call the roaming range, or the sort of home territory of 4 children, and they're all 8 years old, but they're in 4 generations of the same family who grew up in the same city. So you can see that big blob that takes up most of the map. That's the home territory of the great-grandfather in this family at the age of 8, and he could travel 6 miles, 10 kilometers across the city on his own. And then you can see how the circles shrink with each generation until you can maybe see that little dot that's up in the corner of the map, and that's the roaming range of the son, the child in this family at the age of 8 today. And he's actually allowed to go to the end of his street, which is more everyday freedom than most children have. And I think this shows one of the most profound and one of the most underexplored changes in the nature of childhood, and we're seeing it around the world. And I think it's a really powerful starting point for thinking about children, child-friendly cities and neighborhoods.
¿Cómo llegaste a trabajar sobre la infancia?
I kind of fell into the topic of working on childhood. I was studying in my 20s for a master's degree in philosophy and looking for a part-time job to go alongside this. I got a junior position in an NGO, a children's charity, that promoted the importance of outdoor play. Well, I finished the degree, but it was the job that most interested me, and that was over 25 years ago. Becoming a parent was a key moment for me as well, made me think a lot more about children's lives, and I could see firsthand how important it was for my daughter to have places to play and to be able to get out of doors and have some everyday freedom in her life. And the reason I started looking at urban planning and design was because I could see the importance of things like traffic and nearby green spaces. I felt that playgrounds weren't enough on their own, although they are important, and I heard about different approaches. One of them was the Dutch woonurf or home zone street design for residential streets. Now, in a home zone, the street space is shared, so that traffic is allowed, but it has to go slowly, and parked cars can only park in certain areas, meaning that the street space is safe and pleasant for people to socialize and for children to play. Now, I was lucky enough to go on a study tour, visiting and seeing Dutch and German home zones in the 1990s, and it had a big impact on me. You can see an image of a Dutch home zone in front of you now, and I think it's not hard to imagine how this could be a place where it'd be lots of opportunities for children to play out and socialise and get to know their friends, and for adults in the street to do the same.
¿Cómo ves hoy a la infancia en la ciudad?
I think growing up in the city varies a lot, depending on the city and the child and the family and the neighbourhood. If you're lucky enough to be a middle-class child living in a safe and green neighbourhood, cities can be great places to grow up, full of energy, diverse people and cultures, opportunities. But there are bad things about urban life too. Pollution, traffic danger, noise, safety fears, and a lack of green space and nature are all harm the health and well-being of children in many cities around the world. Whatever city you live in, the problems are often worse for poorer neighbourhoods and poorer families. However, in some cities, especially in low and middle income countries, and I've seen this myself in South America, more affluent children maybe have less everyday freedom in their lives than their peers in poorer neighbourhoods and in favelas and informal settlements. Now, the reasons are complex, but I think part of the reason is because of middle-class families having highly car-dependent lives and also living in very car-dominated neighbourhoods. Now, I'm not blaming middle-class families, and like almost all parents, middle-class parents try to do the best for their kids, and it's not always easy to make family life work in an urban context. I'm certainly not saying that life is better all round for children living in poor neighbourhoods. That's clearly not true. Extreme inequality and poverty make cities worse for everyone, but they hit the poorest hardest. But I do think we need to see that car-dominated and polluted and noisy cities and neighbourhoods are not great places for any child to grow up.
¿Tienen los niños derecho a jugar en la ciudad?
Everyone accepts that it's good for children to play as part and parcel of a healthy, happy childhood. And of course that includes urban children. And children's right to play is enshrined in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which almost every country on earth has signed up to. However, as I've said already, traffic danger, lack of space and safety fears leave many urban children unable to play. And in schools and childcare settings, often there's time pressure and lack of space that also leaves children with less opportunity to play out than is really healthy. Another barrier is adult intolerance of children's play. In my own city, London, we're seeing some housing schemes that are imposing strict rules that stop children from playing in outdoor spaces. And sometimes these rules are just because one adult has made a complaint. So in many countries around the world, including my own, girls face greater barriers to playing and getting around on their own than boys do, especially teenage girls. And this may be partly down to social and cultural attitudes, which may lead some parents to give girls less freedom than boys. But it can also just be down to poorly designed public spaces that don't pay enough attention to what makes them work well for girls. Sports and activities that boys tend to enjoy, so ball games, soccer, skateboarding, tend to get more focus and more attention. And the needs and interests of children, of girls, are downplayed, and I think that needs to change. I also think that disabled children have often very poor opportunities to play. Spaces are not designed with their needs and interests in mind. It can be difficult to even get into some green spaces and play areas, and the challenges that disabled children and their families faced are not properly appreciated. So there are many reasons why children's right to play is not being fulfilled in urban areas.
¿Por qué es importante que los niños experimenten los espacios al aire libre?
It's really important for children to play outdoors for all sorts of reasons, but broadly speaking, because it helps keep them healthy and happy. And actually there's huge body of evidence showing both the happiness and the health of children being supported by outdoor play. I'm just going to share one chart with you. You can see in front of you a chart that shows that for a number of different countries, children who play out daily are significantly more happy. Their subjective well-being is higher than children who play out rarely. So you can see in every country that's surveyed here, there's that significant gap between the children who play out daily, who are significantly happier than ones who don't. Now, I know that's probably no surprise to you, but I think it's important to have this data to back up these claims. And of course, outdoor play is good because it gives children contact with nature, space and time to kind of get some balance in their lives, to maybe sort of decompress and calm down from pressures. And one of the magical things about play, and especially outdoor play, is that children get a taste of real freedom. They find out what it is to be an agent, to be somebody who has some say over what happens in their lives and what happens around them. And they can create moments of joy out of almost nothing, just through their own efforts. And that gives them a sense that they are people who can make a difference. And so in ways that we don't fully understand, it helps children to cope with everyday life and to be able to find a way, a path in life, and in particular to cope with new and uncertain situations. In fact, there's growing evidence that play has a key role in children's mental health. And our experience of the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns surely adds weight to this view, where we've seen significant mental health problems in children and young people as a result of the experience of the pandemic. And in particular of being stuck indoors and unable to spend time with friends and get outside.
¿Es la seguridad lo más importante a la hora de diseñar espacios lúdicos?
Safety is important when we're thinking about designing playful places, but fun and stimulation are surely important too. It's no good if we make a place that's really safe, but it's also so boring that no child will ever want to spend any time there. So these factors need to be brought together, and that's difficult because sometimes they pull in different directions. Now, of course, when children play, we don't want them to get badly hurt, but we do want them to enjoy themselves, to have some freedom, to be able to test themselves and to learn how to keep themselves safe. And of course, children love that feeling of the butterflies in the stomach, of being slightly on the edge of their comfort zones, doing something that's a little bit scary. These feelings are both a part of what makes playing so special, but also really important learning experiences for children, that they learn what it feels like to be slightly stressed, that it's not a catastrophe, but it's something that they can manage and do something about. So there's no such thing as absolute safety. Children, in fact, can come to harm even in the safest of places. But sometimes our well-meaning efforts to keep children safe actually deprive them of some of the experiences that help them learn how to deal with uncertainty and difficult situations. So a balanced and thoughtful approach is needed. We cannot and should not eliminate risks from children's lives. We have to accept a degree of uncertainty. But we also can't leave children to the fates, and we have a duty of care. Different people have different views on what is safe or unsafe, and that's challenging as well. Sometimes there's no obvious right or wrong answer, and so compromise and discussion is needed. So those who design and build and manage spaces for play are at the heart of this challenge of finding a balanced approach. We need to make these spaces attractive and engaging, but we have a duty of care to make sure they don't have too much danger. And it's particularly important to avoid hidden risks. Yes, the risks that that children can't make sense of themselves. So, we don't expect, and we shouldn't expect, children to know if a piece of equipment is on the verge of collapse because it hasn't been properly maintained. But we shouldn't expect young children to be able to figure out if their head is going to be stuck in a piece of equipment. That's a job for us adults. But some other aspects of safety are capable of being managed by children themselves, falling over, running, avoiding obstacles, maybe having slightly unstable ground. A wobbly bridge is a good example of where that does add to the danger of a crossing in a playground, but it's also more exciting and more challenging for children. So a balanced and thoughtful approach is vital.
¿Cómo hacer que las ciudades sean más amigables con la infancia?
The focus of my work is to get city leaders behind the idea of child-friendly planning and design, and to see children's needs and wishes as a catalyst for making cities better for everyone. So let's ask ourselves what a child-friendly neighbourhood or child-friendly city looks and feels like. Well, there's a variety of different places where we can go and children can play and enjoy themselves. But also, it's easy to get around a neighbourhood, crucially to get around on foot or by bike, because of course this is how children travel. Now, child-friendly cities and neighbourhoods are not just for the rich or the middle classes, but for everyone. So municipal programmes need to have a focus on fairness and on equity. This is important because if you don't have that focus, then often those who have the power and the influence and the money will be at the front of the line. Because, who doesn't want to live in a neighbourhood that's green and playful and walkable? We also need to experiment with different approaches and involve local people in improving their neighbourhoods and understanding the problems that they face, including local children. I've seen some great examples of communities coming together and working with the municipality to improve neighbourhoods. And one example you can see in front of you now is from a visit I made a couple of years ago to Recife, to some of the hillside favelas. And this was a programme called More Life in the Hills that was proving so popular that neighbourhoods were desperate to join it, and in some cases just started making these basic improvements to paths and alleys and sorting out sanitation just off their own bats. So many towns and cities have to do more to get the basics right for the people who live in cities, especially in poorer neighbourhoods. Water, sanitation, housing, education, health services, economic opportunities are all, of course, crucial. But it's not enough if children have nowhere to play and if they can't get to see their friends or they find it difficult to get to school. So I think children's public life in cities is a good test of neighbourhoods and for cities as a whole. As Enrique Peñalosa said, children are a kind of indicator species for cities. If you're in a neighbourhood and you see children of different ages, with and without their parents, being active, visible, getting around that city or that neighbourhood on their own, in numbers, then that's a sign of the health of that human habitat. In just the same way that if you see salmon swimming up a river, that's the sign of the health of that habitat.